Darrell McCall, you knew Ray Price for a whole lot of years and were part of his band. Were you in the band when Johnny Bush was there?
Yes, I was. I sure was, Bill. I go back to probably 1961 with Ray. As a matter of fact, I always said that Ray kind of saved my life at that particular time, because I had been working with Farron, and Hubert Long was booking me, and I had a record in the charts. And there was a guy in Kansas City named Cactus Jack that had passed away. And so Patsy Cline and I and a bunch of us were going to fly over to Kansas City in the plane. And right at the last minute, Ray called me and asked me if I'd like to go to work in front of his Cherokee Cowboys. And I said, I've always wanted to be a Cherokee Cowboy, especially because my buddy was there, you know, at the Big E. And so I went to work with Ray. And if you remember right, buddy, Ray called us and he said, meet me at the airport. We're going to take my little plane and fly to Washington State. Remember?
No.
I knew you wouldn't remember.
It must have been a different Buddy M.
It was. At the time, it was. But anyway, Ray got his plane out. He had a little Piper Aztec, and our pilot was Keith Bandy. I think you might have known him, didn't you, Bill? And he flew us to Denver, Colorado. We fueled up, went on into Washington State. And on the way back, we were listening to a ground radio station, and it came across the radio in the plane that they were down. So that I always contributed Ray to kind of saving my tail, but there's nobody in the world I'd rather worked with than the great Ray Price. Ray, my opinion of Ray was he was country with class. He had the class to go with it. He wasn't a redneck, you know, it was a good, and I love that kind of music.
Okay, now you played bass in the band?
I played bass and fronted and sung harmony with Ray.
Okay, now was this was after Van Howard had been with him?
Yes, it
for all of those years. Now that's pretty big shoes to fill, because Van Howard was as good a tenor singer and could phrase right with Ray.
Yes.
So you were filling pretty big shoes.
Oh, I know it. But I had fun doing it. I was, at the time I wasn't very old, and I was with the guys that I wanted to pick with, you know, the Big E and Tommy Jackson and Shorty Lavender, people like that. And I was right in my element as far as picking. And of course, the cherry on top of it was the great Ray Price. I was proud to wear them eagle feathers and them rhinestone suits. I still think it's the greatest music in the world. And I don't think his voice will ever be topped.
Amen. You may very well be right. Janie, I've got to ask you a question, because he opened up something there. I know in his later years, Eddie Arnold did not particularly like to be called the Tennessee Plowboy. They dubbed him the Tennessee Plowboy early in his career. What did Ray think about being called the Cherokee Cowboy?
Well, he loved it.
He never tried to stop it?
No, absolutely not. He was so proud of those days.
Now, was he part Cherokee?
Yes. His grandmother on his dad's side was Sarah Mahuska, and so he definitely did have Indian blood in him.
But even though he quit wearing the fancy clothes and the rhinestones and the headdress and this type of thing, he never once resented.
Oh, no.
That's good to hear.
Ray
I didn't
Price
know
was
that.
a country boy.
Absolutely.
He never stopped being a country boy.
Well, that's good. I'm glad
Ray's mother had a huge, his mother was a fashion designer, and his stepfather, Mr. Dominic Samini, which most people never heard of Mr. Samini much, and no one really never talked about him. But Mr. Samini immigrated from Italy on a boat back in the 40s, and Ray's mom and dad divorced when he was around 5 years old, and she moved to Dallas with him, and she went to work in this sewing factory, and she tells this wonderful story. I loved his mother, that it was one of those sewing machines that had 12 needles, and she became a master pattern maker. And back in those days, that was when one person made one pattern, and as all of us girls know, that's very important. They don't do that anymore for clothes. She designed size 4, size 6, size 8. She actually measured and made those mannequins. And from her patterns, from her mannequins, then the clothing designers would come in, and that's how they would fit the clothes, and you got your perfect size clothes back then. She made suits, the most beautiful suits you've ever seen. She made all of her own clothes. Well, she also sewed Ray's clothes. In the beginning, she made the very first shirts we've ever seen of him. I don't know if we have any on our display, but she actually handmade those suits for Ray when he first came to Nashville and met Hank Williams, and the first ones he wore on the Grand Ole Opry. But back to his dad, I'm sorry, Ray said, Eddie Stubbs gave me some advice. Eddie said, Janie, focus, don't ramble. And as so many people know, I have 43 years with this man, and it's hard to go back and pinpoint exactly what and stay on focus. You guys got to help me. Okay, and so Mr. Cimini he was a fashion designer himself, and he had his own line of clothes in Neiman Marcus at the time. And so he interviewed Ray's mother for us as a seamstress. And so the story she tells was that she walked in there and she said, I saw those 12 needles in that sewing machine and I was terrified. But she said, I was starving to death. I had to have a job. And so she said, I sat down at that table with this machine in front of me, and she said, this good-looking Italian man came over and said, well, Clara, have you had experience on this machine? And she said, why, yes, I have. And so he said, well, show me what you can do. And so she said she pulled that wheel, and those needles started going up and down. And she said that the material started doing all of this. And she and Mr. Cimini apparently had the same sort of a meeting that Ray and I had. He told her, he said, if you've got the nerve enough to tell me you can sew on this machine, I've got nerve enough to train you. And so that's how she met Mr. Cimini. And they fell in love, and so she got married. And Mr. Cimini was very dignified. He was a completely different type of man than Ray's father. Ray's father, Walter Price, was a wonderful, wonderful person. Ray loved his dad. He loved his dad so much. He loved both of his parents. But his dad was so special. But he told me that Mr. Cimini is the one who actually sent him to voice school, and he was taught violin as a young age when he was in his preteens and right before he went into the Marines. And so he said that Mr. Cimini said after he came to Nashville and he became the star that he had started out to be a star, Mr. Cimini, someone asked him about how he felt about Ray being a country music singer. And he said, in his broken English, he said, I can't do this as well as his mother, but he said, I send my son to school to learn to sing the opera, and he ends up singing the Grand Ole Opry.
Well, he certainly made the right choice. Ray did.